Chapter 46. A Study by Candlelight. Captain Grimm led the two harpies across the courtyard towards the main residency. Reyes followed just a little behind the captain, while Gaggara trailed nervously behind him. She was constantly looking about herself, watching every shadow, every movement, and even every flicker of light from the many torches, as if she expected to have to fight at any moment. As always, during the hours of night, there were two guards on duty at the main doors. Upon seeing the harpies approach, the two guards readied their great poleaxes for combat. Reyes could feel the tension in the air. Gaggara had never been in a position before where there were so many humans. She felt like a cold spring. She could go off at any moment, and it wasn't going to take much. The aggressive stance of the guards on duty had her unsheathing her claws and taking a couple of strides forward, ready to lash out. Reyes put an arm out to block her way, and she gave him an accusing glance. Then her features softened. "Sorry," she whispered. Captain Grimm quickly diffused the situation. He signalled to the two soldiers that everything was all right, and they should stand down. The two guards looked suspiciously at the harpies, but they obeyed the order, and returned to a more neutral stance, although they remained very alert. Seeing the soldiers stand down seemed to be enough for Gaggara to relax. She sheathed her claws again. She continued to study every move the two guards made, watching them like a hawk. "Permission to speak, sir?" one of the guards asked. He saluted Captain Grimm. "Granted," Grimm replied. He walked over to the guard in question. "Do you want me to send someone to wake the Ducken or the folks, sir?" "Carpenter, isn't it?" Grimm said. "Yes, sir," the man called Carpenter replied. "Good man. It won't be necessary, thank you, Carpenter. I'm dealing with it." "As you wish, sir," Carpenter accepted, although he remained uncertain. He saluted again and then seemed to stare past the captain, almost as if he wasn't there. Captain Grimm stepped past the guard and took a torch from one of the floor sconces positioned on either side of the doors. He then opened the leftmost door and turned to Reyes to say, "Follow me," before he set foot across the threshold and into the residency. These corridors were very familiar to Reyes. Every 10 feet or so, alternating as to which wall it was on, there was a wall sconce, with a lit torch shining a small puddle of light into the corridors, kept lit for the benefit of the roving patrol that did a regular circuit of the lower floor of the residency. It wasn't all that far to the study, but to Reyes it was a trip back to memory lane. Everything he passed was a memory from his childhood: the suit of armour sitting in the corner, the portrait of the man who had originally built this castle, the portraits of his father and mother, though the bust of the king seemed to be new. Reyes missed this place. It was good to be back. "So, who was Sir Ducken and Sir Fawkes? I don't think I know either of those names," Reyes asked of Captain Grimm as they rounded the last corner. "Be glad you don't," Grimm replied. "They were left here by the king, just in case you should ever return. They have standing orders to kill you on sight. Up until about 4 months ago, one of them was on permanent duty even during the hours of night. Then they got a little complacent. They decided that it was unlikely for a harpy to return during the hours of darkness because of the notoriously bad night sight you creatures have. Personally, I think that by then neither of them truly thought you would ever return anyway." "And these men are knights?" Reyes declared, shocked. That didn't sound like the devotion to duty that Reyes thought knights were supposed to have. "They are," Grimm assured him, "though your brother has often said that he felt it unlikely the king would expend his best on a small task like this." Grimm finally reached the door to the study and opened it. The study itself was almost in total darkness. Grimm entered the room first and set about lighting some of the candles to make the place seem more comfortable. "Please," Grimm said, "make yourselves at home. We all still think of this castle as your home anyway. I'll just get these candles lit, and then I'll go and wait here." Reyes was glad to see the study again. He had spent many a happy hour in here learning all he could about his race, as well as many of the other races that graced the lands. There was the huge familiar desk behind which his father had often sat working. There, on the wall behind the desk, was the painting of the entire family. It had been painted shortly after Menethilda was born, because there she was depicted in Alicia's arms, while both Reyes and Kell seemed to be absent. Then there was the bookcase containing all those books that Reyes could remember reading from his childhood, and the huge map on the wall facing opposite the desk that showed all of them off in quite a chunk of Elestrade. Gaggara also looked amazed as she entered the study. She had spent most of her life in straw huts like the one in Harpytown. Upon moving out of that hut, she had gained a billet in a run-down old building that looked as if it might fall apart if someone should so much as sneeze. In comparison, the study of the De Moth family castle had to be quite a wonder to behold. Grim finished lighting the candles and then headed to the door. Right, I'll go wait here. Try not to make too much noise. It would be better if no one found you here alone. Reyes nodded. We'll be quiet. I won't be returning, Grim explained. I'm supposed to be on duty at the gates. It was good to see you again, Grim, Reyes commented. You too, Reyes. See you around. And with that, Grim left the study, closing the door firmly behind him. Reyes knew that Gaggara hadn't understood a word of what had passed between him and Grim, but he had assumed that she would remain calm because he and the captain had obviously been on friendly terms. Indeed, she hadn't given Grim so much as a suspicious look while he had been here with them. Nevertheless, as soon as the door to the study was closed, she was over there testing it. Gaggara opened the door no more than a couple of inches and then closed it again. She seemed greatly relieved as she exclaimed, It's not locked. They trust the two of us to stay in here. I used to live here, remember, Reyes told her. Grim trusts me, and I told her that she could trust you. Please don't prove me wrong. I won't, Gaggara assured him. She did seem to be quite calm now in comparison to how on edge she had seemed to be out in the courtyard. I guess I was surprised that they would leave us here unguarded, and without so much as even locking the door. She stepped back out into the middle of the room, asking, So this is the place we spent your youth? Well, not just this room, Reyes commented, though I do remember many a happy hour spent in this room with my father. I never knew my father, Gaggara commented. She made her way slowly around the room, looking at everything carefully. These humans are really decadent. I mean, look at all this stuff. Why does anyone need so much stuff? A sturdy bow, a few arrows, and maybe a handful of pretty stones should be more than enough for anyone. Most races tend to gather things like this, Reyes told her. We might even be the exception. When I was young, I too used to gather things about me. All sorts of things. Toys, souvenirs from various places I visited, things that my brothers and sisters gave me, and so on. Gaggara made her way round to the bookcase and picked out one of the books. This thing is very worn. Yes, Reyes commented, feeling a little awkward. I'm afraid it's my fault that book is so dog-eared. You see, it's a book about harpies. I was brought up to believe I was human, but I still had a fascination for learning about my own race. It's just that, at the time, I thought there was something wrong with me. I'm not sure I can ever get over that, Gaggara commented. She began to thumb her way through the book. Making you believe you were human? It sounds incredibly cruel. They did it to keep me safe, Reyes explained. Gaggara didn't speak a word of flourish. She couldn't understand any of the words in the book. Instead, she looked at the pictures. Reyes remembered that most of the pictures in the book would be diagrams of small parts of harpy anatomy, with a rough description of how they worked. But there were a few more interesting pictures, such as the one on page 19. Who is she? Gaggara asked. She turned the book so that Reyes could see the picture she meant. The picture Gaggara showed him was the one that Reyes had spent a lot of his youth studying in great detail. When Reyes hadn't been busy with other tasks, such as sword or magic training, he would often retire to the study in order to spend some time alone just studying that picture. It was sad to think of it now, but he remembered he had even talked to the picture on occasion, declaring his love for her beauty. It's just an artist's representation of what she thought a harpy looked like, Reyes said. She's cute, Gaggara admitted. What's this white stuff that seems to have drifted across her? It's gauze, Reyes said quickly. Human artists tend to add stuff like that to their nude artwork in order to make it more suitable for public viewing. Really? Gaggara said, puzzled. What's wrong with nudity? Humans tend to prefer to keep certain parts of their bodies covered at all times, Reyes explained. Nudity taboos? Gaggara grumbled. I don't think I've ever understood them. Personally, I prefer being naked. It makes me feel so free. I'll admit, Reyes commented, I was surprised how quickly I got used to the idea. But then, we are harpies. I guess it's all part of who we are. Gaggara continued to thumb through the book looking for the next picture, which, if Reyes remembered correctly, was an anatomical breakdown of a harpy's wing. She was still looking through the book when the door opened, and Tia entered the study. Gaggara was instantly alert. She extended her claws. The book dropped to her feet, forgotten, as she prepared herself for combat. Gaggara, Reyes warned. Gaggara stared at Tia for a moment, and then turned her head towards Reyes. Suddenly, she seemed to realise what was happening. Sorry. She sheathed her claws again and bent down to pick the book up. I guess I'm a little on edge tonight. She put the book back on the shelf behind her. Reyes, Tia said, closing the door behind him. He sounded very sleepy and perhaps a little bit puzzled. He also had a worried look on his face. Reyes supposed that coming face to face with two harpies in a small room could well be quite disconcerting, especially as Tyr was unarmed. "Yes, brother," Reyes replied with a smile. He went to meet Tyr halfway. Tyr suddenly brightened greatly. "It is you! It's great to see you again. I understand things have been going well for you in Golespon." "You might say that," Reyes said. "The place is very oppressive, though. The city has a lot of rules and only one real punishment for breaking them: death. Most of these rules seem to be in place to stop the city imploding on itself, while others seem to be there purely for the purpose of enlisting fighters for their arena. I'm glad to be away from the place." Tyr nodded. "I'm glad to see you too." He yawned. "Sir Richmond told me you had a girlfriend. I take it this is she." "This is Gaggara," Reyes affirmed. He walked over to her and took hold of her arm. Gaggara glanced round to Reyes for a second. She looked down at where he had taken hold of her arm, and then grabbed him with that arm and pulled him closer. Tyr walked over to Gaggara and offered his hand in greeting. "Pleased to meet you." Gaggara gave Tyr a blank, suspicious look. She looked at the hand, and then tilted her head slightly to one side. Reyes explained, "she doesn't speak any flourish." "Oh," Tyr replied, a little unsure. "Well, I've been trying to learn a little bit of Harpy from the notebooks you left behind." He turned to Gaggara and spoke meaningfully the words, "I marry you to my moronic aubergine." Gaggara began to giggle. Tyr blinked. "Did I say something wrong?" "You're putting the emphasis on the wrong parts of the words. I used to do the same thing," Reyes explained. "Oh," Tyr lowered his head. "Maybe I need to get a proper teacher, much as you did." "Spend some time in Harpytown in Golespon. You'll soon pick it up," Reyes joked. "Somehow I don't think that is a good idea," Tyr replied. "Probably not," Reyes agreed. However, if you do want to learn the language, you will need a proper teacher. You won't get much from the few notes I left behind. They were just an aid to memory. You need to hear the way it's actually spoken. You see, Harpies have no written language of their own. Everything I wrote down I wrote phonetically. I used characters that were as close to the actual sounds as I could get. They aren't sound for sound correct. Often they're off by quite a margin." "I see," Reyes commented. "It looks like you've become quite fluent." "Gaggara is a great teacher," Reyes claimed. "She spent many evenings just talking to me and teaching me parts of a language that Agnar simply never touched upon." Gaggara seemed startled for a moment at the mention of the name Agnar. Her head started to look from Reyes to Tyr, her eyes taking in every aspect of the room. She looked every bit the huntress. "She's not here," Reyes explained, seeing Gaggara's attitude. "We're talking about someone both Tyr and I knew. Another girl by the name of Agnar, not our friend back at the barracks." "Oh," Gaggara said, settling down a little. "Are you sure we can trust her?" Tyr asked, slightly concerned. "I certainly hope so," Reyes declared. "She's not just my girlfriend. She thinks she might be with my child." "Really? But surely you two aren't married yet? Or did I miss something?" From the sound of his voice, Tyr was actually a little scandalized. "Apparently Harpies don't think in terms of marriage, but I'm trying to bring her around to the idea. It's hard work. Most of the time she thinks I'm joking," Reyes replied. "Well then, congratulations," Tyr commented. He slapped Reyes on the arm. This put Gaggara on her guard again. "Congratulations to both of you," Tyr added. He then, evidently, decided to try a little more of the Harpy language on Gaggara. "Well cooked." Gaggara gave him a strange look. She tilted her head to one side again, and then she looked at Reyes as if seeking his help. Reyes explained what he and his brother had been talking about to Gaggara. "I think he means well done. He's congratulating us." Gaggara leaned across and kissed Reyes. "Have you told him why we're here yet?" "Not yet," Reyes admitted. "I suppose I should." Then he turned back to his brother and said, "This is more than just a social call." "I guessed," Tyr replied. "Turning up in the middle of the night in a country where most people would shoot you before giving you a chance to explain yourself. Would this be about Jorvis's invasion again?" "The invasion," Reyes echoed, "yes." Tyr sighed and nodded. "You know, we have it on good authority from the king himself. The build-up of elven forces in Golespon is all down to the fact that the elves are planning to attack the goblin lands. Our soldiers are the best trained in the world. It would be suicide for them to come this way. Of all the spies we had in Golespon, Jorvis was probably the most vocal about the potential attack from the elven lands. But every time he warned us that he was sure something was coming, nothing ever materialized." Now, don't get me wrong, Jarvis is probably one of our best agents in Golespon. It was why we sent you to him in the first place. However, he does seem to have this bee in his bonnet about an invasion that not one of our other agents seem to know anything about. When was the last time you heard from Jarvis? Reyes asked. It was more than a month ago, Tyr admitted. Normally our agents report in every week or so, more often if they think they have uncovered something important. It's not unusual for a spy to go silent for a while though, because they're investigating something. What worries to Richmond the most is that of the 8 spies he had posted in and around the Golespon area, not one of them has reported in for the last 2 to 3 weeks. Your spies are dead, Reyes said simply. This almost definitely meant that even if Jarvis hadn't been the man being burnt at the stake on that day, he was still dead. I'm sorry, the elves wanted to make sure that the details of their invasion plans didn't find their way back to you. They carried out an intensive purge of all humans in the city, and they checked every magical item within the city walls, looking for anything suspicious. I never heard how many spies they caught, if any, but if you haven't heard from any of them, I would assume they're dead. Are you sure about this invasion? Tyr asked. He was suddenly very serious. Gaggara and I are supposed to be part of it, Reyes said. He indicated the skirt and the armband. These indicate that I hold the rank of chargeman in a regiment called the Hope. Actually, I've just been promoted. I just haven't got my new badges yet. I guess if I can't trust my own brother, who can I trust? Very well, I'll do what I can to buff up the defences of the castle. I'll get the residents of the nearby villages into the protection of the castle walls. Do you have any idea how many there are going to be in this invasion army? None, Reyes replied. I would estimate the enemy to be at least 100,000 strong, but their numbers could be as high as 300,000. Face it, this castle isn't going to stand long against such a force. I mean, how many men do you have to defend it with? Only 1,000 at the moment, Tyr admitted. Although, if we recall all our soldiers from the nearby villages, we should be able to bolster our forces considerably. Reyes nodded. I hate to suggest it, but you might be better off evacuating the place entirely. Move yourself, your men, and as many peasants as you can possibly manage to a place of safety. Tyr thought about this for a moment and then said, No, this castle is the safest place in the land. It's nigh on impregnable. We can stand against any conventional siege for well over a year. This is exactly the reason why this castle was built here in the first place. The elves will have harpies on their side, Reyes pointed out. These walls will mean nothing to them. Seriously, you need to send riders to every village in the land and warn them of the coming invasion. You need to contact our brother in Lamington and let him know what's happening. Get our people to a place of safety. Trust me, this castle isn't as safe as you might hope. Where? Tyr pressed. I don't know, Reyes admitted. Maybe Grateful for Mangloss will think of something. I won't leave the castle unguarded, Tyr insisted. Your first calling is to protect the lives of the populace, Reyes argued. Tyr sighed and nodded. I'll do what I can, but I won't let this castle fall without a fight. How long do we have? I was planning to leave for the capital tomorrow for our sister's wedding. Can I leave this until I get back, or is it more urgent? You don't have time, Reyes told him. The elves plan to use the royal wedding as their signal for the invasion. They think that with all the dukes and their families in the capital, along with 1,000 or more men each, as well as all the best strategic officers, their best fighters, their major advisors, their... I see what you're driving at, Tyr interrupted. The elves could be in First Town before the king even learns that his country has come under attack. I'll need to send a rider to the capital. I'll need to send one now, tonight. It won't be easy. The king has been convinced by his own major advisors and his spies that the elves are no threat to him whatsoever. I hate to be responsible for ruining my sister's wedding, Reyes said, but it should probably be postponed. The dukes need to get home so they can defend their lands and rally their forces. We stand a good chance of stemming the tide of the invasion if we can meet them in one big battle, rather than letting the elves roll over us one at a time. Meet them in the field, you mean? Tyr said. He nodded. I like the sound of that. We only have 5 days, though. It would take 3 days for a rider to reach First Town. The dukes could never get to their own lands, gather a large enough force, and then get here in time. What if you took your army to the capital and met the enemy there? Reyes asked. I'll talk to Greyforth, but I doubt he'd agree. It would leave them off and the rest of Floth open to the elves, Tyr said. By the time we engaged the enemy, most of the country would already have fallen. Morale would be at rock bottom. No, we have to make our stand here. If we fight here, we have room to retreat. If we fight on the coast, we would have no choice but to win or die. Reyes nodded. I guess you're right. Would you like Gaggara and me to fly to the capital? We can get there in less than 2 days. It could buy us a whole lot of time. Tyr smiled at the thought. It would buy us time, but what sort of reception would you get? They would shoot you down before you had a chance to speak. No, I'd better send a rider. A rider would look a lot more official. Reyes nodded reluctantly. What Tyr said made sense. But had Reyes gone, he might have gotten to see Jenny again. Tyr continued. Greyforth is expecting me to arrive sometime early tomorrow, with an eye to travel into the capital together. I'd better send a rider his way as well. Lamington is on the way to the capital, Reyes commented. Use the same rider as you sent to the king. It'll free up more riders to warn the neighbouring villages. I'll do that, Tyr said. Lamington has strong walls, but they won't stand for long against harpies. I think I'd suggest that Greyforth take refuge here. After all, this is his home too. Who knows? Maybe he, Mangloss and I can come up with a better plan. I hope so, Reyes said. He noted that his brother hadn't included him in this triumvirate. Talks a lot, doesn't she? Gaggara commented. She yawned, and it was clear she hadn't understood a word. It's been a while since we last chatted, Reyes explained to her. We've been catching up on old times. Did you tell her about the invasion yet? Gaggara asked. I have, Reyes admitted. Now we're discussing what we can do about it. What do you think? I'd like to stay here and fight, Gaggara said, though I'm not sure about standing on top of some battlements. I'd rather fly above the action, shooting down into the enemy lines. I'm also not sure about engaging the enemy, especially if they're our friends from the 421st. I find it unlikely that it would be, Reyes told her. There are over 40 regiments of the Hope in Golespon. I expect they'll only use one against this castle, so it's unlikely to be our lot. What are you two discussing? Tyr asked. Oh, I was asking my girlfriend what she wanted to do to aid the war against the elves. What did she say? Tyr said. She wants to stay and help defend the castle, Reyes explained. That's a very noble attitude, Tyr commented. Not very wise, though. We have 2 of the king's knights in the castle at the moment. Sir Duncan and Sir Fawkes, Reyes interrupted. Yes, Captain Grimm mentioned them to me. Can't we deal with them in some way? They have orders from the king, Tyr explained. If you stayed until morning, they would try to kill you. If you killed them instead, it would upset a lot of the men. I'm sorry, but you can't stay. Reyes sighed and nodded. So what can Gaggara and I do to help? Tyr looked down at the floor for a moment as if seeking inspiration. I hate to say it because it's been good to see you again, but the best thing you can do is return to Golespon tonight and continue to prepare for the invasion with the rest of the Elven army. You might be able to do something from the inside to sabotage the enemy's plan. I don't like it, Reyes replied. He didn't really want to go back there. Gaggara and I went through a lot of trouble to get here tonight. Besides, if we have spies in Golespon, then isn't it likely for the elves to have spies here? I think we made enough of an impression on the guards at the gates for word of our visit to get round the castle. What do we do when the Inquisitors come looking for us? I'll do what I can to keep your visit quiet. I'll order the guards who saw you not to speak of the incident. I'll do what I can to protect you, Tyr said. The thing is, Reyes said unconvinced, I would rather not put Gaggara in any more danger considering her condition. She'll certainly be in danger if she stays here. You both will, Tyr commented. Please do this for me, Reyes. If things don't go well for us, it'll be good to have a man on the inside. A man and a woman, Reyes commented, taking hold of Gaggara's arm again. Gaggara gave him a funny look, and then rested her head gently on his shoulder. As you say, Tyr said uncertainly. Okay, Reyes agreed reluctantly. I warn you though, if I even suspect that the Inquisitors are looking for me, I shall flee with Gaggara. I don't know where we'll go, but I'm sure we'll think of something. Fair enough, Tyr said. Good luck to you both. Tyr then turned to Gaggara and told her, I export good triangle. Gaggara lifted her head from Reyes' shoulder to give him another strange look. She glanced at Reyes with a confused expression on her face. Reyes shrugged his shoulders. He had no idea what Tyr was trying to say either. Then he told her what Tyr wanted them to do next. So now we fly back? Gaggara asked doubtfully. We do, Reyes agreed. This is exciting, Gaggara stated. Becoming a spy to keep an eye on the elves? Are you sure you're all right with this? Reyes asked. It's a bit late if I wasn't, Gaggara replied. I don't exactly feel indebted to the elves after they killed my mother. It would be a good way to pay them back. Besides, You seem to keep forgetting that you are my male. Whatever you want is all right by me. I must admit I'm a little concerned about the idea of aiding humans, but you seem to trust them, and I trust you, and that's good enough for me." "I love you," Race declared. "What did she say?" Tia asked. Race translated as best he could for his brother. "Hopefully, next time we meet will be under better circumstances," Tia said as he opened the door to the study. "I hope so too, brother," Race replied. "I think I'd better escort you out, just in case we bump into a guard," Tia suggested.